Shade cloth can get you shade pretty well instantly, but there's a lot of things that shade cloth doesn't do. When people plant a new fruit tree, they're so worried about the soil and what they're going to fertilize it with, and shade is often something that's forgotten about until the last minute, till we're in summer, till it's hot and the tree is under so much stress. Welcome back to the garden, and today I'm going to be sharing my top 5 living shade plants that not only provide shade to the garden but also provide a lot of food. Flowers for the bees and nectar for the birds. Some of them are nitrogen fixing to help improve the soil, and others are just really good for mulch and chop and drop, which is also going to help feed the soil and help my fruit trees grow stronger. Especially in a hot climate like here in Perth, it can be hot and sunny and dry from about November all the way through till April. So that's a long period. That's 6 months of stress on a tree, especially when it's young, to expect it to put on a lot of new growth. What can happen is that it goes into survival mode and it's barely hanging on, and then winter comes and the growth slows down again. So you're not getting as much growth out of that tree as you could do if you were able to give it some relief during those hot months. Something that shade cloth does do is provide quick instant shade, but it doesn't cool the garden as much as living shade does. And you'll notice that when you walk down the street and you walk past someone's yard that has established mature trees, the temperature drops quite significantly as you walk past, and that can have a huge effect on the garden. So number 1 is what I like to call my umbrella shade plant. So this papaya has a bit of an umbrella-like shape, and it works as a fantastic living umbrella for the garden. And as you can see, it also produces a whole lot of food. So that's a really good bonus. What I love about papayas is that you can eat the fruit green, just like a carrot, grated up in salads or in stews and curries. And then once it's ripe, you can use it as a fruit. So you get multiple different benefits out of this plant. Plus it attracts a lot of bees. The smell of the papaya flowers has so much perfume. It's really, quite surprisingly strong, like a tropical flavor, so that attracts a lot of beneficial insects to the garden. And papayas are also a short living plant, so this isn't going to live for very long. They're here for a good time, not a long time, so that works out really well, because in this garden here I have all my deciduous fruit trees planted, and eventually they're going to be strong enough and big enough to be able to withstand summer on their own, and they're not going to need an umbrella. They're going to want more sunlight. So after a few years of being able to harvest all this fruit and then collect the seeds to plant in other parts of my garden, I'm then going to be able to chop this back and use this as mulch, use this to feed the garden, and it will have served a really, really important part of establishing my garden and helping keep it alive during the summer while it's still young. The amazing thing about this papaya plant is that I grew this from a tiny little seed. So they grow really quickly, they produce a lot of food, and then you basically have your own little nursery that you can propagate and plant seeds to put in other areas of the garden. The other thing to note is that we are in winter at the moment, and it has a full coverage of leaves. So this is something that you want to consider when you decide where to plant this, is that it's going to have it's going to be shade all year round. And here in my deciduous fruit tree mini food forest, these trees are asleep during winter, so they don't need that sunlight. But if this was planted somewhere else in the garden, it could block a lot of light. So when you're thinking about living shade for your garden, it is important to decide when you want that shade. Do you want it all year round, or is it just a summer thing that you're wanting to do? Because then we can take a look at something that loses its leaves in winter to let the light in. This area in my garden is my tropical section. So I have things like sour sop, starfruit, custard apples, a lime tree, which also can benefit from some summer shade. They are more of an understory tree than other citrus. And this is some little grafts that I've been doing on my starfruit. But this will be much happier in some dappled shade over summer. And here in this garden, my shade plant is the Moringa. And as you can see, it's pretty much lost most of its leaves and looks pretty sad during winter, which is great because it lets in all this winter sun for the tropical plants. I've got one Moringa pod that I'm hoping will get mature enough to save the seeds from, but as you can see, pretty much got no leaves left. Is starting to shoot some new growth, so it may be waking up soon. And then in summer it gives off this really beautiful dappled light, so It's nice filtered sunlight for these tropicals so they're not getting burnt to a crisp in the hot Perth sun. Oh, it's quite windy, isn't it? Not ideal. Something that I get asked all the time is, do I have any native plants in my garden? And the answer is yes. This one here is a native hakea plant, and I grew this from a tiny tube stock. And as you can see, it's got this big trunk on it. It's one of the most established trees now in this front yard. This is a hakea, or a pincushion, that I hope is going to add some more protection to my avocado as it gets taller. This tree has obviously taken off. It can handle our poor sandy soils. It can handle our hot, dry summers because it is a native Australian plant. It also produces a lot of flowers that the bees and the birds love. So this one here is a really good pollinator plant that's going to give quick shade. It's going to give really hardy. It's going to be able to grow in a really harsh condition. And it does have more of a dappled light. So you can see it's not a really dense coverage, and I can thin out, I need to come through and thin out some of these branches here, and I can start pruning it to make this trunk taller and taller so that the light gets dispersed further out. And then one day, once my main trees in this garden, which are my avocado and my mango, get too big and they need the space, then I can remove this tree and use this, mulch it to feed those plants. And it would have served, again, a really important part of establishing my garden in helping nurse along the avocado and the mango while they're still young. This is a really good example of a deciduous shade plant. So at the moment it's winter and it's lost all its leaves, so it's letting a lot of light in, but in summer it's going to have a really lush green coverage, and it's also going to produce fruit. So this one here is the pomegranate. And the great thing about having a pomegranate as a shade tree is that they grow so quickly and easily from cuttings. So once this garden gets established and I don't have room for it anymore, I can always take cuttings of it and put it in other areas of my garden. Or if I have other areas in my garden that could really do with some summer shade, and I can easily populate this and put it in other parts of the garden. So it's also a little bit like a nursery tree as well. So I have 2 pomegranates here in this garden, and they are planted on the hottest corners of the garden. So here right next to the driveway where we get radiant heat from the concrete, these trees act as a little bit of a buffer because pomegranates are super hardy and can handle hot, dry conditions, which is perfect for my garden here in Perth. I needed some of those. And as you can see, it's got no leaves. It's letting the light in for the soursop behind it and the starfruit. And then in summer, it will definitely help buffer some of that hot heat from this side of the garden. And again, here we've got the pomegranate, and right behind it, we've got the sapodilla and the avocado. So those are both going to benefit from a little bit of protection in summer, but in winter, they're going to really want that sunlight. Now this one here is another one of my favorite shade plants because it gives off a really nice dappled light. It also produces edible pods, edible peas, so you can use these fresh like edamame, or you can use them dried more like a lentil. And it has lots of flowers that attracts the bees, and it is nitrogen fixing. It is part of the legume family, so it's a really good one to chop and drop and to use to help feed the soil and help improve all the surrounding fruit trees. It also grows in the most harshest conditions, hot, dry, sandy soil. It's really, really hardy, and you can propagate it really easily from seed. So it produces all these seed pods that I've been collecting and popping in different parts of my garden to provide some really good summer shade. And in winter, it does have leaves, but you can prune it back and let the light into wherever you need to let it in. It does need a really good haircut, and I will be going through and thinning out some of these thicker branches because what you want to do is keep them nice and young and new because they're easy to cut, easy to chop and drop. These thicker ones here, they're starting to get a bit too big, so I can cut this back, and then once the weather starts warming up, it'll start pushing a lot of new growth. It's already pushing a lot of growth and flowers at the moment, and I've found it kind of produces pods nearly all year round, so it's a really productive plant. And again, this is a short-lived plant, so this isn't going to live for 50 years, but it does produce seeds that grow really easily, so I can propagate that and put that in different parts of the garden, but eventually it will come out as well, and I'll have my mango well established by then. And what a lot of people don't realise is that fruit trees can actually get sunburnt. So once the trunk or this main stem of the plant gets burnt, it can kill off all the cells down that side, and it can stop the flow of nutrients. And that means that the tree ends up getting stunted and stops growing, and sometimes even die. So having adequate shade in the garden is really important, especially if it's something that you can cut back and use for multiple different things, because I would much rather cut back overgrowth and use that as mulch than fight to keep my trees alive. And of course there are other trees that you can grow for shade as well. Like I use bananas a lot in my food forest as well. We've got some fruiting up here, and those are again something that can be used as shade, but then we get a crop, we get mulch, and we can chop that down and feed that to the garden as well. The trees that can be used as shade, like my big feijoas now, are offering a lot of shade to the garden, and I also have things like my guava, which I'm cutting back to let light in, but it's great for summer shade for all these little delicate plants down here. So there are a lot of things that can be used as living shade, and I'd love to know what you're growing in your garden. So leave me a comment below, because that will also become a really good resource for other people that are watching this video.